The call came while I was slicing limes for Sunday wings, the knife thudding against the cutting board like a slow heartbeat. Atlanta heat pressed against the windows, that humid blanket that makes everything feel heavier than it should. My wife's phone buzzed across the counter, screen lighting up with a number I didn't know. I wiped citrus from my fingers and swiped. "Coleman Pawn," a voice said, tinny and bored. "We're calling about the Omega watch, ready for pickup." My stomach went cold like I'd swallowed ice. Lemon oil and garlic hung in the air, and suddenly it smelled wrong. "What watch?" I asked, though I knew. I could feel the absence of it the way you miss a tooth with your tongue. My grandfather's watch, my father's watch, my watch. The vintage Omega, black leather band, engraving on the back. For time well lived, JC to LC. Customer left it as collateral. 7-day hold is up. The blade slipped in my hand and nicked my thumb. Not deep, just enough to sting. "Who left it?" I asked, already hearing my own voice flatten. "Phone contact is listed as Naomi Cole," the clerk said. "This the right number?" I looked toward the doorway. Naomi was humming in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the rug, polishing her nails a soft, pale pink. The scent of acetone drifted in. She was wearing my old Spellman homecoming tee as a smock, and the soft rasp of the nail file carried over the hum of the AC. My chest tightened. "Yeah," I said. "It's the right number." "Great. We'll be open till 8. Click. The kitchen was suddenly too loud and too quiet at the same time. The AC kicked on. The dog, Juniper, snored under the table. I felt the pulse in my cut thumb, a hot, petty beat. I set the knife down, washed my hands until the sting dulled, and watched diluted blood spiral into the drain like a ribbon of weak tea. Naomi called out, light and careless, "You good in there, babe?" I stared at the place on my wrist where the watch used to sit. The permanent faint tan line, like a ghost ring. My father had given me that watch the night before his surgery. I remembered the weight of it in the hospital light, the smell of antiseptic and coffee. His voice slow but sure. "Time's tricky, son. It turns us all into different men. Wear this to remember who you're trying to be." I dried my hands and stepped into the doorway. Naomi looked up, eyes warm, glossy mouth curved. She was beautiful and familiar. The shape of my life. My tongue felt heavy. 100 ways to ask the question, and every one of them sounded like a charge sheet. The TV was on silent, closed captions sprinting across a baseball game. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed and faded. "Who was that?" she asked, blowing gently on her nails. "Wrong number," I said, and the lie tasted like pennies. I went back to the kitchen because the angle of her body on the rug, the easy way she trusted me with her back turned, made my chest ache. I dried the knife, set it down just so, and took off my apron. The room smelled like citrus and pepper and something scorched in me. The pawn shop's flickering fluorescent lights were already in my head. That glass case glare. That clerk with his bored voice saying my wife's name like it meant nothing. I grabbed my keys. The metal was warm from the sun streaming through the back door. Naomi's voice floated in again, softer now. "You sure you're good?" "I'll grab more charcoal," I said. Another lie, lighter this time, almost weightless. Back in a bit. In the garage, the heat hit me full force, damp and metallic. Dust motes drifted in the light. The memory of the watch was loud, its steady tick against my wrist while I waited for my father's surgeon, the tiny scratch on the crystal from the night I coached kids at the rec center and caught a bad bounce off the rim. It wasn't just metal. It was a timeline. It was a spine. I drove with the windows cracked because the air felt too still. The city rolled by in streaks of brick and murals and cracked sidewalks. Sunday traffic, the soft thump of bass from a passing charger, a kid on a scooter weaving like a fish. My phone chimed with a text from Naomi, a heart and a flame. I didn't answer. Coleman Pawn sat under a sun-faded awning that had once been red. I pulled in, engine ticking as it cooled. Inside, the place smelled like old wood and cheap cleaner, coins and worn leather. A bell clanged as I stepped in, loud enough to make me blink. Behind the glass, watches lay in neat rows, each one a little trapped time. My chest went tight again. The clerk from the call looked up, thin, a Braves cap, a gold tooth that flashed when he yawned. Help you? My wife left a watch, I said. Omega, black band, engraved. He clicked his tongue, bent, and pulled a small tray from beneath the counter. When he placed it on the glass, the world tunneled. The watch lay there, face down, the leather band a little stiffer than I remembered, the engraving catching the light. For time well lived. I could smell my father's cologne, even though I knew I couldn't. My mouth went dry. You paying the loan or reclaiming? He asked. What's the difference? My voice came out low. Reclaiming means it's hers again. He held up a form. Loan's interest plus fee. You want it in your name? We do a transfer after. Paperwork thing. I looked at the watch and saw my mother's hands at our kitchen table in Macon, cleaning it with a soft cloth every Sunday while the radio played Marvin Gaye. I saw Naomi on our wedding day, tapping my wrist, teasing me for checking the time between dances. I saw my father's eyes the day he said he was proud of me, as if the words were a secret he'd been saving for just the right moment. How much? I asked. He told me. The number sat heavy in the air. It wasn't life-ending, but it wasn't pocket change. I thought of the envelope we kept for emergencies, the way Naomi would tuck a little extra away when I wasn't looking. She'd always been good at stretching $1 till it squealed. I paid. The clerk counted bills with a soft flittering sound. He scratched at the form with a cheap pen, slid it over for my signature. The paper was thin and slick under my palm. You want me to call the customer? He asked. Let her know it's picked up? I stared at him. My mouth felt like sand. No, I said. I'll handle that. Outside, the sunlight felt too clean. I held the watch in my hand for a long beat before buckling it on. The leather cooled against my skin. The second hand started its small, stubborn climb. Tick, tick, tick. Each click felt like a nail set straight, a board put back where it belonged. Back in the car, I let my head rest against the steering wheel. The AC blew stale air that smelled faintly of pine and last week's takeout. My phone buzzed again. Another heart from Naomi then. You need anything? I typed and erased 3 different answers. The truth was a smoke cloud. Suspicion, like static under my skin. I thought of her face when I'd walked out, that open look. I thought of all the years we'd built out of patience and laughter and quiet work, the ordinary bricks that make a life. And still, there was the pawn slip in my pocket, warm from my thigh. When I pulled into our driveway, the sky was starting to soften toward evening. The house smelled like grilled wings and lemon, a good smell, the kind that says home even when your bones are unsettled. Naomi looked up from the kitchen island, eyes bright, smile ready. You were gone a while, she said, voice easy. You get the good charcoal? I stood there longer than I should have, the weight of the watch on my wrist like a verdict. I could feel sweat gather between my shoulder blades. The dog thumped her tail against the cabinet. Yeah, I said, setting the bag down with more care than it needed. Then I met her eyes. My hands were steady, but my voice was not. We need to talk. I watched her smile falter, a quick flicker, like a light dying and fighting its way back. My heart hammered. The watch kept time. About what? She asked. The pawn shop, I said, and the words changed the air between us. It went still and thin and cold, like the room had been emptied of all its oxygen. Somewhere, a neighbor laughed. The second hand on my wrist marched on. She didn't speak. Her mouth parted, but nothing came out. For the first time since the call, I saw something in her eyes that wasn't guilt or surprise. It was fear, deep and old, like it had been waiting for me to find it. Marcus? She whispered, and the sound of my name from her mouth was a plea and a warning at once. The timer on the oven beeped. We both jumped. The smell of honey and heat lifted, sweet and sharp. I turned it off with a jab of my finger, then faced her again. Did you sell it? I asked, and my voice was softer now, because I didn't want to scare whatever truth was hiding. Or did something happen that you haven't told me? Naomi took a breath. Her hands trembled barely, the way a leaf trembles when the air conditioner kicks on. She looked at the watch. She looked at me, and then her eyes slid to the window, to the street beyond, as if she expected someone to be standing there waiting. Please, she said, voice threadbare. Not here. The dog whined. The clock on the stove ticked over a minute. My father's watch answered in steady counterpoint. I felt the familiar anger rise and fade, replaced by something heavier, more patient. I nodded. Okay, I said. Then start where you can. Naomi closed her eyes like she was standing on the edge of a high dive. When she opened them, they were wet, but her chin was set. The room smelled like lemon and fear and truth about to break its shell. Marcus, she said again, and this time my name sounded like a door unlocking. I swear to you I didn't betray you. I was trying to keep us safe. She paused, pulled the words up like a rope from a deep well. Because of something that happened a long time ago. Because of you. The watch ticked. Outside, a car rolled by, music low. I felt the ground shift under my feet, just enough to make me brace. Then tell me, I said. She opened her mouth to confess, and the front door knocked. 3 slow, heavy raps that rattled the glass and froze the room. The knock wasn't frantic. It wasn't polite either. It was the kind of knock that carried weight, like whoever stood outside knew they had all the time in the world. My pulse jumped, fast and uneven, while Naomi's face drained of color. Her freshly painted nails dug into her palms as she froze in the middle of the kitchen, eyes darting to mine. 3 beats. The knock came again. Slower. Louder. I motioned for Naomi to stay put. My throat was dry, my voice lower than I meant. I got it. The walk to the door felt longer than it was. Juniper barked once, sharp, then whimpered and backed into the hallway. That set my nerves on fire. Dogs know things. They feel danger before you do. My father used to say that. I pressed one hand against the door, felt the vibrations of the third knock echo through the wood. I glanced through the peephole. A man stood there. Not tall, not short, average in a way that made him hard to place. But everything about him said trouble. Clean shave, pressed shirt, but his shoulders slouched with a casual menace. He wasn't selling cookies. He wasn't lost. And he wasn't leaving. Evening, he said when he noticed movement. His voice carried through the door like smoke. Too smooth. Too calm. I'm looking for Naomi. My chest tightened. He used her name like he owned it. I cracked the door just enough to speak. Chain still on. Who's asking? The man smiled. Or maybe it was just his mouth stretching, because his eyes didn't follow. Friend? Old business? He leaned closer. Tell her Cal's here. Behind me, I heard a sharp intake of breath. Naomi. The sound wasn't surprise. It was recognition. My gut twisted. Not a good time, I said, pushing the door to close. His palm slapped flat against the frame, not hard, but firm. He wasn't forcing his way in yet, just showing he could. See, the thing is, it's not really up to you. She owes me. Those words cut sharper than the knife I'd nicked myself with earlier. My grip on the frame tightened until my knuckles burned. Naomi's voice came shaky from the kitchen, louder now. Marcus, don't! I turned, saw her standing rigid, hands trembling at her sides. Her eyes begged me to step away from the door, to not pick this fight. That only made the fire in my chest burn hotter. I unhooked the chain, swung the door wider, and stepped out onto the porch, letting it click shut behind me. The evening air wrapped around me, humid, thick, buzzing with cicadas. Cal's smile widened, satisfied. Now that's better, he said. I crossed my arms, grounding myself in the weight of the watch on my wrist. My father's watch. Say what you came to say, then leave. He tilted his head, studying me like I was a puzzle. You're the husband. He said it slow, deliberate, tasting the word like it amused him. Means you probably don't know. Or maybe you do. And you're just stubborn. Know what? I asked. That your wife's been keeping me afloat for years. His grin sharpened. Debt's a nasty thing. Doesn't go away just because she found herself a solid man with a house and a dog. She still owes. And I don't like waiting. Every muscle in my body wanted to swing, plant a fist right through that smug smile. But something in Naomi's voice, her earlier plea of not here, held me back. I steadied my tone. She doesn't owe you anymore. Cal chuckled, low and cold. You think because you bailed out one little pawn ticket that we're square? That was a drop. I'm talking oceans. He leaned close, his breath sour with tobacco. If she doesn't pay up, maybe I start looking at what you've built here. Be a shame if it all crumbled. He stepped back, adjusted his cuffs like this was a casual visit. Tell Naomi I'll be back tomorrow, alone. She knows what I want. And just like that, he walked down the steps, not looking back, hands in his pockets like a man who had no fear in the world. A silver sedan idled at the curb, headlights off. He slid in, and the car eased away, disappearing into the darkening street. I stood frozen, jaw clenched so tight it ached. My watch ticked steady, each second a hammer on my chest. Behind me, I heard the soft creak of the door opening. Naomi's voice, low, cracked. "Marcus, I can explain." I turned, looked at her silhouetted in the doorway, her face pale against the kitchen light. My anger and confusion battled with something else, a gnawing dread that this wasn't just about money, or even betrayal. This was bigger, older. "Then start explaining," I said. My voice came out harsher than I wanted, but I couldn't reel it back. "Because right now, all I've got is a stranger on my porch calling my wife by her first name, and a pawn ticket with your signature on it." Naomi's hands shook as she reached for me, then pulled back before touching. Her lips parted, but no words came. For a long moment, all I heard was the cicadas outside and the ticking of my watch. Finally, she whispered, "Marcus, I sold the watch. Because of you. Because if I hadn't, you wouldn't be here." Her words dropped between us like stones in a well, and the silence after was bottomless. I shut the door and the deadbolt slid home with a dull, final click. The house felt smaller, like the walls had leaned in while Cal was talking. The air smelled like honeyed wings gone cool, and the sharp bite of nail polish that had outstayed its welcome. My mouth was dry. The watch on my wrist kept digging a steady, accusing groove into my skin. Naomi stood by the island, arms wrapped around herself. Her eyes were shining, but she wasn't crying yet. Something about the way she held her shoulders, squared, braced, told me this wasn't the first time she'd had to explain something ugly. I pulled out a stool, but I didn't sit. My legs buzzed with restless electricity, the kind that makes you pace even when you know it won't help. "Say it," I managed. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone older. "All of it." She nodded once, a small, precise motion, like she was agreeing to surgery without anesthesia. She reached for a glass, filled it from the fridge. The clink of ice was too loud in the quiet kitchen. When she pushed the water in my direction, our fingers didn't touch. "I sold the watch to stop the bleed," she said, breath measured like she had practiced. "But the bleed started a long time ago. 12 years?" Atlanta's summer air hummed through the vent. 12 years put us back in that cramped apartment off North Avenue, second floor. Thin walls, roaches that didn't care what you sprayed. I could taste ramen salt and discount coffee just thinking about it. I could hear the early morning buses sighing at the stop beneath our window. 12 years ago," she continued, eyes fixed on a point over my shoulder. "You remember your old Buick? The gray one that coughed like a smoker and pulled left if you let it?" I nodded. I remembered every scrape on that car, the way the fabric ceiling sagged like a tired eyelid. I remembered commuting to the warehouse before dawn, fingers numb around a steering wheel that shook if I went over 50. "You were coming home late from the rec center," she said. "Storm night. Streets were slick, branches everywhere. You called me from the Buick, voice tight, said the brakes were soft. I told you to go slow, keep distance, use the handbrake if you had to. You laughed it off, said you had it." I remembered rain drumming hard, wipers losing the fight. I remembered that tightness in my voice I pretended wasn't fear. I remembered Naomi's calm, the way it soaked into me even over a bad connection. "You didn't make the light at Ponce," she said, softer now. "You slid. Not your fault. Some genius had dumped oil near the curb. You clipped a delivery van and spun. By the time I got there, the Buick looked like someone had balled it up and tried to smooth it back out with their hands." My stomach turned. The phantom scent of antifreeze and hot metal filled my nose. That night had lived in me as snapshots. The ambulance strobe stuttering against wet pavement. A paramedic asking my name twice. Naomi's face coming into focus like a lighthouse. I shook my head. I remember the crash. I remember the ER. But we had insurance. "We had the kind that smiles at you and pays for Band-Aids," she said, an edge flickering under her control. "What we didn't have was leverage when the other driver's company sent a man who looked at our address and your job and decided you were the one who blinked wrong. They wanted you to sign something that would keep their man clean. Take the blame. Eat it. They were quick about it, too. Before you could get a lawyer, before you could think. I pictured a thin folder on a cheap clipboard. I could feel the ghost of a pen pressed into my hand in a too-bright hallway. I remembered the headache that made everything sound like it was underwater. Shame winked on, small, hot. I signed something? You didn't, she said, because I took that clipboard and told that man to get out of my sight. Then I did something else. She swallowed, eyes finally returning to mine. I called someone I shouldn't have. The name was already in my mouth and I hated that it fit there. Cal. She nodded. Back then, he was just a guy who can make things happen. A friend of a friend from when I did promotions off Edgewood. He knew people who knew people. He said he could make sure the delivery company's adjuster backed off, that the paperwork got lost, that you didn't get pinned with a black mark you'd never shake. He said no one would touch our mailbox with court dates and demands. He named a number. It was ugly, but he called it a favor. The fridge motor kicked on, low and steady, like a second heartbeat. I felt mine in my throat. How ugly. $8,000, she said, which was $8 million to us. He told me not to worry, that he'd float me. You're good for it. You're clean. He said it like a compliment and a threat. She exhaled. He was as good as his word. The adjuster vanished. The Vans company stopped calling. You went back to work. Your ribs healed. We slept. And then the favor started charging interest, the kind that doesn't live on paper. The water in my glass tasted like metal. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at me like the question hurt more than the answer. Because you would have tried to fix it with pride and fists. Because you were healing, and I needed you alive and employed. Because I thought I could outrun it. I kept it on a leash for years, paid him off little by little every tax return, every spare dollar from hair clients, every time I picked up overtime at the clinic. He always moved the fence. You're close, he'd say, just a little more. Then he'd remind me of what would happen if we didn't respect the arrangement. The corners of the kitchen blurred, like heat above asphalt. It wasn't betrayal, it was triage. My hand found the countertop, cool under my palm. And the watch? I'd been keeping him at bay with side money, she said. Then the clinic cut hours. Couple of my regulars moved. Juniper's surgery last winter. Things stacked. Cal started showing up as a reminder. The look you saw tonight? I've seen it before. Last week he said the next reminder would be more educational. I panicked. I needed a plug, fast. The only thing with value that wasn't our mortgage or your car was the one thing I swore I'd never touch. Her eyes flicked to my wrist, then away, like it burned. I thought I could pawn it, buy a week, get him off our porch until I found a better fix. I planned to get it back before you noticed. Then Coleman called, and you answered. Silence settled heavy. Outside, a motorcycle rattled past, the sound fraying into the humid dusk. I rubbed my thumb over the watch's smooth crystal. My father's engraving warmed against my pulse like it was trying to speak. You should have told me, I said, but the anger had drained out on the second should've. What replaced it was raw and complicated, gratitude braided with shame, fear tied to a stubborn, stupid pride. She had carried a storm I didn't see because I didn't look hard enough at the clouds. I know, she said. I kept thinking I'd end it clean and present you with the victory, like a gift. Look what I took care of while you were building this life for us. But it doesn't end clean with men like him. It ends when you draw a line and someone's willing to bleed to keep it. I closed my eyes and let that sit. The image came uninvited. Cal on my porch again. That lazy smile. That sedan idling patience at the curb. The line she was talking about was painted across our front steps, through our living room, under our bed. Tomorrow, I said slowly, opening my eyes. He said he'll be back tomorrow. Alone. She nodded. He means me. I shook my head. The chair legs scraped when I finally sat, the sound sharp enough to make Juniper flinch in the hallway. No, he means us. Naomi's lip trembled. She set her hands flat on the island, palms white at the edges from the pressure. I don't want you in it. I'm already in it, I said, softer than the words felt. You put yourself in it to keep me breathing. I'm not going to sit in a room you paid for with fear, and pretend I don't know the rent. She looked at me for a long time, searching for the thing that would tell her whether I was serious or just making brave noises. Whatever she saw softened her shoulders. She nodded again. Slower. The first tear finally slipped, tracing a clean line through her makeup. "What's the plan?" she asked, voice small and practical at once. I didn't have one that felt smart yet. All I had were instincts. You don't meet a man like Cal empty-handed or empty-headed. You gather proof. You gather allies. You build light where he expects shadows. I took a breath that tasted like lemon and resolve. "First, you tell me everything you know about him. Real name, people he trusts, places he uses, where he slips. Then we make calls. To a lawyer. To my cousin Darius in APD. To Ms. Greer from the block who knows everybody's grandmother and grandson. We put this in daylight. I won't let him keep living rent-free in your nerves." Naomi watched me, tears catching in her lashes, a fragile glint. When she spoke, it was a whisper edged with steel. "Okay." The watch ticked on my wrist, louder than it had any right to be. Time, tricky as ever, had turned me into a different man than I'd been when I walked into the pawn shop. A husband who saw the bill for an old rescue and decided to pay it together. "Tomorrow," I said again, to the room, to my father's memory, to the humid night that pressed its ear against our windows. "He's not ready for tomorrow." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed beside Naomi, listening to her breath shift between shallow and steady, every inhale breaking against the silence like a wave. The watch on my wrist ticked loud enough to drive nails into my skull. Midnight, 1, 2. I turned over and over, the sheets twisted, sweat dampening my back. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Cal leaning against my doorframe, smiling like he'd already won. By 5, I gave up. I eased out of bed, careful not to wake Naomi, though I suspected she wasn't sleeping much either. The kitchen was dim, the air heavy with the ghosts of last night's dinner. I poured coffee, black, bitter, strong enough to scrape the edges off my nerves. The quiet gave me time to think, and thinking brought the old training back. Not military, not police. Just the lessons my father drilled into me in that Macon backyard with the patchy grass and the rusted grill. "Don't wait for a man like that to tell you what the rules are," he'd said once, teaching me how to box out under a hoop. "Decide the rules yourself, then play so hard he don't want to be on the same court." By the time Naomi padded into the kitchen in her robe, I had a notebook open on the counter. Names, numbers, arrows scribbled between them. My cousin Darius's name circled twice. She looked at me, eyes puffy but alert, and shook her head. "You look like you're building a war map." I took a long sip of coffee. "Feels like I am." She slid into the chair across from me. The robe slipped off her shoulder and she pulled it back up, distracted. "You really think Darius will help? He's APD, yeah, but more than that, he hates bullies. Always has." I tapped the page. "If Cal's been circling you this long, there's a trail. Could be small, could be big, but it's there. Darius knows where to look." Naomi hesitated, chewing her lip. "And if there isn't? What if Cal's smart enough to keep his hands clean? Then we don't fight him in the dark," I said. "We drag him into the daylight until he burns." Her eyes softened, but fear still clung to them. "That sounds good when you say it, Marcus, but Cal doesn't scare easy." I leaned across the counter, my hand brushing hers. Her skin was cold, her fingers rigid. "Neither do I." The clock over the stove ticked past 7. Naomi stood, moved to the sink, stared out the window at the street. "He'll come today. He always keeps his word, in the worst ways." "I'll be ready," I said. And I meant it. By mid-morning, I was on the phone with Darius. He answered like he always did. No hello, just, "What's wrong?" I laid it out, piece by piece. He didn't interrupt, just let me talk until my throat was raw. Then he whistled low. "'Cause, that's dirtier than a boot in a hog pen. You sure Naomi's telling it straight?" "She's telling it straight," I said, sharper than I meant. "She carried this for me. For us." "All right," he said, and I could hear keys clacking in the background. "I'll run Cal through the system. Might not be his real name, but aliases leave shadows. Everybody leaves shadows." When I hung up, a knot in my chest loosened just enough to let air in. I turned to find Naomi watching me, arms folded tight. What did he say? He's checking. We'll know soon. She nodded, slow. Marcus? What if knowing makes things worse? I met her eyes. They were tired, but behind the fear was something I hadn't seen in a while, trust. Then we'll handle worse together. The hours stretched thin. Noon. 1. The sun bore down hard, making the sidewalk outside shimmer. Every car that slowed near our house made Juniper bark, and every bark made Naomi flinch. I kept pacing, circling the living room like a caged thing. At 3, Darius texted, "Got something? Call me when he shows." I didn't get a chance to reply, because at 3:05, 3 slow, heavy knocks rattled the door. The same rhythm as last night. Naomi froze in the kitchen. Juniper whimpered, tail tucked. I stood, the watch tight on my wrist, and walked to the door. This time I didn't look through the peephole. I opened it wide, and there he was, Cal, smiling like the sun hadn't touched him all day. Hands in his pockets, shoulders easy, eyes sharp. "Afternoon, Marcus," he said, as if we were old friends. "Is Naomi home?" The watch ticked. My heart matched it. I stepped into the doorway, filling it with my body. "She's not the one you'll be talking to today." Cal's smile sharpened, his eyes flicking to the watch on my wrist. "I see you reclaimed your heirloom. Cute. Let's see if you can keep it." Behind me, Naomi whispered my name, but I didn't step back. "Cal," I said, my voice low, steady, carrying all the weight of the sleepless night. The truth Naomi had laid bare, and the years of silence that ended here. "The rules just changed." Cal tilted his head, amused, like I'd just told a joke he didn't get but planned to laugh at anyway. "Change the rules, huh?" he said, rocking back on his heels. "That's cute, but you don't look like a man who understands how this game's played." The afternoon sun caught the sweat at his hairline, but his smile stayed sharp. He smelled faintly of tobacco and cologne that was too sweet, like it was hiding something sour underneath. I didn't move from the doorway. My shoulders filled the frame, the watch ticking steady against my wrist. "The game ends today. You don't knock on my door again." He chuckled, soft and low, like he'd been waiting for me to say that. His eyes slid past me, toward Naomi, who stood frozen by the counter. "You sure you want to speak for her, Marcus? She and I go way back, longer than you realize." Naomi flinched. That was the first time I saw real fear flash across her face. Not from the debt, not from the past, but from what Cal might spill if he chose to. I clenched my fists. "You want to talk about debts? Do it with me," Cal smirked. "Careful. When a man takes over someone else's tab, he inherits all the interest." The silence stretched, broken only by Juniper's low growl from the hallway. Cal's grin widened, like he enjoyed the sound. "Tomorrow at noon," he said finally. "You meet me at Greenbrier Mall. Lower lot. Alone. Bring what's owed." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear. "And if you don't, I'll collect in ways you can't imagine." He stepped back, casual as ever, and walked off toward that same silver sedan. Didn't look back once. I closed the door slowly, every click of the lock sounding louder than it should. Naomi's hands covered her mouth, her eyes wet. "Marcus," she whispered, shaking her head. "You can't meet him. That's his trap." "I know," I said, pulling the pawn slip from my pocket and smoothing it flat against the counter. The paper felt thin, fragile, but it was proof. "Which is why we're not going to play it his way." Naomi lowered her hands. Fear still clung to her, but under it I saw something else beginning to spark. Hope. I didn't wait. As soon as Cal's taillights disappeared, I pulled out my phone and called Darius. He picked up on the second ring. "Talk to me." "He was just here," I said. My voice came out tight, clipped. "Gave me a time and place. Greenbrier Mall. Tomorrow. Noon. Wants me alone." On the other end, I heard keys clacking, then a sigh. "Yeah, that's his style. Neutral ground, public enough to keep guns holstered, private enough for intimidation. Classic setup." "What's the move?" I asked. "First, you don't go alone," Darius said. "Second, you let me run backup. Not official. Cal's too slippery for paperwork, but I can pull some eyes. People who don't scare easy." I glanced at Naomi. She sat at the table, twisting her hands together until her knuckles turned pale. She was listening to every word, hanging on the silence between them. "Do it," I told Darius. "Already on it," he said. Then his tone softened. "'Cause, you good? Really?" I looked at the watch, felt the steady tick on my wrist. "I will be." When I hung up, Naomi searched my face. "You're really going?" I sat across from her, leaned forward. "I'm not letting him haunt you another 12 years. We end this tomorrow, together." Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. She just nodded, once, steady this time. And for the first time since the pawn shop call, I believed we had a shot. The house felt different after Cal's visit. Every creak in the floorboards made Naomi stiffen. Every passing car had me glancing through the blinds. We locked the doors twice, checked the windows, even pulled the curtains tight. But the unease wasn't outside. It was sitting in the room with us. Naomi sat curled on the couch, knees to her chest, staring at the muted TV without really watching. I stood by the window, arms crossed, the watch heavy on my wrist. Tick, tick, tick. The sound was steady, but my thoughts weren't. She finally broke the silence. "Marcus, what if this doesn't work? What if he doesn't back off?" I turned, saw the fear in her eyes, but also the exhaustion of someone who had carried too much for too long. "Then we push harder," I said. "We shine enough light on him that he can't move without burning. Darius will help, and I won't let him drag you down anymore." She hugged her knees tighter. "You don't know what men like Cal are capable of." I sat beside her, close enough that our shoulders touched. "I don't care. I know what I'm capable of when it comes to protecting you." That got through. Her body loosened just enough to lean into me, her head resting on my chest. I wrapped my arm around her, breathing in the faint scent of her shampoo, the warmth of her skin. For the first time all day, we were quiet without fear filling the space. Just us, steady, waiting. Tomorrow would come fast, and we'd be ready. Morning came heavy, like the air itself knew what was waiting for us. I didn't bother with breakfast, just black coffee, the bitter kind that scrapes your throat raw. Naomi sat across from me at the table, picking at a piece of toast she never ate. Her eyes kept darting to the clock, then to the watch on my wrist, like both of them were ticking down to the same moment. At 11, my phone buzzed. "Darius, we're set. I'll be nearby. You just keep him talking." I slid the phone back into my pocket. "It's time." Naomi's hand shot out, gripping mine tight. "Marcus, promise me. Don't let him bait you. He wants you angry. That's how he wins." I covered her hand with my other, squeezing back. "I'll keep my head, but I won't let him walk over us anymore." The drive to Greenbrier felt longer than it should have. The sun beat down on cracked asphalt, and every traffic light seemed to hold just a second too long. When I finally pulled into the lower lot, the space was nearly empty. Just a few cars scattered like forgotten toys. And there he was, Cal, leaning against his silver sedan, same pressed shirt, same lazy smile, like this was just another day for him. I parked, stepped out, and shut the door with a deliberate click. The watch ticked steady against my wrist, grounding me. Cal spread his arms, welcoming. "Right on time. I like that in a man." I didn't smile. I didn't move closer. "Let's talk." His grin widened. "Oh, we'll talk. But first, let's see if you brought enough to make this conversation worth my while." The air around us was still, too still. Somewhere in the distance, I knew Darius was watching. My heart pounded, but my voice stayed steady. "I didn't come to pay you, Cal," I said. "I came to end this." For the first time, his smile slipped, just a little. Cal blinked once, then let out a low chuckle, shaking his head like I was a child trying on my father's shoes. "End this?" he said, pushing off the sedan. "Son, you don't get to decide when it ends. That's my call." He stepped closer, slow and deliberate, the sound of his shoes scraping against the asphalt echoing in the empty lot. I stayed rooted, shoulders squared, fists loose at my sides. "You think that watch on your wrist makes you a man ready to play in my world?" he asked. "That's just a shiny reminder of what you almost lost. You don't scare me, Marcus, and you sure as hell don't get to dictate terms." The sun hit my back, hot enough to sting, but I didn't flinch. "You've had your terms for 12 years. You've eaten off her fear long enough. Today you get nothing." For a second, silence hung between us, heavy and sharp. Then his grin returned, colder this time. Then I'll just take something else. His hand twitched toward his pocket. Before I could react, a sharp voice cut through the lot. Don't even think about it, Cal. Both our heads snapped toward the sound. Darius stepped out from behind a row of cars, badge clipped low on his belt, one hand resting casually near his sidearm. His eyes were locked on Cal, steady, unblinking. Cal's smile thinned to a line. Ah, so this is the cavalry. Darius kept walking, slow, measured. Cavalry, backup, whatever you want to call it. Point is, you're not in the shadows anymore. I felt the weight shift. For the first time, Cal looked less certain. And for the first time, I believed we might actually win. Cal's eyes flicked from me to Darius, calculating. That grin of his was gone now, replaced with something sharper, hungrier. So that's the play, he said. Bring family with a badge. Thought you were smarter than that, Marcus. You really think this ends with paperwork? Darius stopped a few feet away, stance relaxed but ready. You're not as untouchable as you think, Cal. Men like you always leave a trail, and I've already started pulling it. Cal's jaw flexed. His hand hovered near his pocket again, but slower this time, like he was testing limits. You don't scare me. I stepped forward then, closing the gap between us, the watch ticking like a drum in my ear. My voice came out low, even. Good. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm telling you, this is over. You come near Naomi again, you come near me again, and every shadow you've ever lived in gets lit up. You won't be able to buy groceries without someone watching. For a moment he didn't move, just stared, eyes narrowed, searching for a crack. Then slowly his lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You think daylight saves you? Daylight burns, Marcus. Careful you don't get caught in the fire too. He turned, slipped back toward his car. The engine started with a low growl. He rolled down the window, leaned out just enough to let his words hang. This ain't finished. Not by a long shot. Then he was gone, tires squealing against the hot asphalt, leaving the lot empty except for the echo of his threat. I stood still, fists tight, heart hammering. Darius came up beside me, eyes on the retreating sedan. He's rattled. That's good, but he's not done. Not yet. I looked at the space where Cal had stood, felt the watch pulse against my skin, and knew my cousin was right. Not finished. Not by a long shot. The drive home was quiet. Naomi sat turned toward the window, her reflection pale against the glass. I kept one hand tight on the wheel, the other resting on my thigh, fingers drumming to the steady beat of the watch. When we pulled into the driveway, Juniper barked from inside, tail thumping against the door like nothing had changed. But everything had. Inside, Naomi finally spoke. He won't stop. I set the keys down hard on the counter. I know. She turned, her voice trembling but sharp. Then what's the point of all this? If he can just keep circling back? I faced her, met her eyes. The point is, we're not hiding anymore. Darius is pulling threads. Cal's sweating. That's the start. Her shoulders sagged. I'm so tired of waiting for the next knock. I stepped closer, placed my hands gently on her arms. Then we make sure there's no next knock. Her eyes searched mine. And how do we do that, Marcus? The truth was, I didn't have the full answer. But I knew one thing. Cal wanted us afraid, wanted us reacting. That was over. We take control, I said. We set the terms. Naomi closed her eyes, leaned her forehead against my chest. For the first time, I felt her breathe deep, like she wanted to believe me. The watch ticked on, steady and unyielding. Tomorrow, we'd push back harder. That night, the house was too still. Naomi moved from room to room like a ghost, double-checking locks, pulling curtains tight, glancing over her shoulder every few steps. I sat at the dining table with the pawn slip, the notebook, and my father's watch ticking against my wrist. The papers in front of me felt like puzzle pieces from two different boxes. Naomi's debt, Cal's threats, Darius's trail, but somehow I knew they fit together. I just had to find the corners. Naomi stopped in the doorway, arms crossed, shoulders hunched. You think he meant it? That threat he made in the lot? I looked up at her, saw the way the lamplight caught her tired eyes. Naomi, men like Cal only know how to mean it, but rattled men make mistakes. She walked over, sat across from me. Her fingers brushed the edge of the pawn slip, tracing it like it might reveal more than paper and ink. For 12 years, Marcus, I've been paying in fear. Every time I thought it was the last, he moved the line. Do you know what that does to a person? I reached for her hand. She let me take it this time. Her skin was cool, but her grip was tight, almost desperate. I know now, I said quietly, and I should have known sooner. But the difference is, he's not moving the line anymore. We are. Her throat worked as she swallowed. And what if the line we draw gets us hurt? I leaned forward, steady. Then at least it's our line, not his. Silence stretched. Juniper shifted under the table, sighing heavy like she was tired of carrying the house's nerves too. Naomi finally pulled her hand free and pushed the pawn slip back toward me. Then tell me the plan. I tapped the notebook. Darius is pulling names. Businesses Cal's touched. Cars he's been seen in. Places he parks himself when he's not circling us. Cal acts like he's untouchable, but nobody lives in Atlanta without leaving shadows. Tomorrow, we make noise. The kind he can't ignore. Naomi frowned. Noise? Calls, records, even neighbors. He wants to keep this in the dark. We drag him into daylight, inch by inch. She looked at me long and hard, then nodded slowly. And if daylight doesn't burn him fast enough? I didn't answer right away. The watch ticked between us, steady, unrelenting. Then, I said finally, we show him we're not afraid of the dark either. The next morning, Darius showed up before 9. He was in plain clothes, baseball cap low, eyes sharp. He set a folder on the table that looked too thick for comfort. Your boy Cal's been busy, he said, flipping it open. Not much on paper under his name. That's deliberate. But I got records of shell companies, short-term rentals, cars in and out of lots all over Fulton. He's tied to more pawn slips than yours, and a couple of loan notes that look like they were written in the back of a Waffle House. It's sloppy, but it's leverage. Naomi leaned over, scanning the pages, her lips tight. That's him. He always made it feel personal, but I knew he was bleeding other people too. Darius nodded. Predators don't hunt one meal. He looked at me. But listen, guys like him, when they feel heat, they push back hard before they run. He already tested you in that lot. Next time, he won't be as polite. Naomi's breath caught. So what do we do? Darius closed the folder with a firm hand. We set him up, force him to make a mistake in daylight. But Marcus, he looked straight at me, you need to be ready for him to come at you sideways. He won't swing where you're looking. I tightened my jaw, felt the watch pressing against my wrist, like a reminder of every second that had led here. I'll be ready. Naomi's hand slid into mine under the table. This time her grip wasn't desperate. It was steady. For the first time I felt like we weren't waiting for the next knock. We were building toward it. And when it came, we'd be the ones opening the door. By noon, the weight in the house had shifted. For weeks, months, years even, Cal had dictated the rhythm of our lives, knocking when he wanted, collecting fear like rent. But today, the air felt different, charged. Naomi moved with a new sharpness, no longer shrinking into corners but standing straighter. Her chin lifted just enough to show she was done bending. Darius spread papers and photos across the dining table like cards in a game. Here's what we've got. 2 fronts. 1, we push him with what I can get into official hands. Fraud, intimidation, illegal lending practices. Might take time, but it sticks. 2, we bait him into showing his hand. If he slips up where I can see it, he's finished faster. Naomi frowned, tapping one of the photos. Cal stepping out of a different car, a black SUV. And what does bait look like? Darius looked at me, then back at her. Bait looks like leverage. Something he thinks he can't let slip away. Something personal. Her lips parted. Me. The word hung in the air. My pulse spiked. No. She held my gaze. Marcus, I've been his leverage for 12 years. If it takes using myself as bait one last time to end it, then I'll do it. I shook my head, hard. I'm not putting you in front of him again. She leaned forward, eyes burning with a resolve I hadn't seen before. Marcus, I already have been in front of him. Alone. For years. You just didn't know it. The difference now is, I won't be alone. She glanced at Darius, then back at me. I'll have both of you. Darius cleared his throat, breaking the tension. She's right. And Marcus, You know she's right, but we do it on our terms, not his. We pick the place, the time, the setup, cameras, eyes, backup. We control the angles. If he bites, he's done. I looked at Naomi, saw the steel in her face under the fear. She wasn't asking me. She was telling me. Finally I exhaled. All right, but he doesn't touch you. Not this time. Not ever again. Naomi reached across the table, laid her hand on mine. Then let's finish this. We set the stage fast. Darius chose the spot, an abandoned car wash on the edge of East Point. Cameras rigged discreetly in the bay, audio wired through his phone. He positioned 2 of his trusted guys nearby, watching without being seen. Naomi stood in the open space of the wash bay, her hair tied back, no makeup, just herself. She looked stripped of pretense, but stronger for it. My chest tightened watching her, pride and worry colliding inside me. I waited out of sight, just around the corner, close enough to intervene but hidden enough for Cal to believe he had her alone. My father's watch ticked in my ear like a countdown. At 5 on the dot, the silver sedan rolled in. Cal stepped out, casual as ever, hands in his pockets, smile sharp. "Naomi, there she is." She didn't flinch. Her voice carried steady, even through the echo of the concrete. "It ends today, Cal." He laughed, a short bark that bounced off the walls. "You don't get to decide that. You never did." She tilted her chin, firm. "I do now." His smile faltered. "You got brave, huh? Must be Marcus filling your head. But brave doesn't pay debts." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "So tell me, sweetheart, what did you put on the table to buy your little husband's courage?" Naomi didn't answer. She just looked at him, steady, unblinking. And in the silence, I stepped out from the shadows. Cal froze. His grin died completely this time. "Me," I said. My voice echoed, heavy. "I'm on the table." The trap had sprung. Cal's eyes darted between us, confusion flashing before his arrogance patched it over. He let out a slow laugh, the kind that tried too hard to sound confident. Well, husband finally decides to step into the room. Thought you'd keep hiding in your shadows." I moved closer, steady, each step deliberate. The car wash bay smelled of oil and damp concrete, the air heavy with silence, except for the tick of my father's watch and the faint hum of a nearby generator. "No shadows today," I said. "Just daylight." Naomi didn't move, didn't break her stare. She was stone, rooted in the spot where she'd stood for 12 years, carrying fear like armor. Only this time the armor had cracked, and something brighter pushed through. Cal shook his head, clicking his tongue. "Marcus, you don't get it. You can puff your chest, bring your cousin with a badge, wire up some cameras. None of it matters. I don't lose. You know why?" He jabbed a finger at his chest. "Because I've already been living in your head. Every night she looked at you sideways, that was me. Every time she jumped at a knock, that was me. You don't beat a ghost." I stopped just a few feet from him, close enough to smell the tobacco on his breath, the cheap cologne failing to hide his sweat. My voice came out low, calm. "You're not a ghost, Cal. Ghosts don't sweat when the lights turn on." His jaw twitched. For the first time his confidence cracked. Darius's voice carried from the shadows behind us. "He's right. You're sloppy. Got you on record with 3 different aliases, tied to 5 loan scams. I've got video, witnesses, paper trails. You thought you could keep it all quiet, but quiet doesn't last." Cal turned, scanning the corners, realizing he wasn't alone, realizing the net was already closing. His smile didn't return this time. "You think paperwork cages me?" he spat. "Paper burns. Fear doesn't." Naomi's voice rang out, strong, clear. "You don't own my fear anymore." That hit him harder than anything I could have said. She stepped forward now, out of the place where he'd kept her small for over a decade. Her voice didn't shake. "For 12 years I paid you in silence. Today I pay you with truth. And the truth is, you're nothing." Cal's mouth opened, but no words came. He looked smaller suddenly, like the weight he'd carried over her had slipped and landed on his own shoulders. I closed the distance, toe-to-toe now. My fists stayed at my sides, but my presence pressed into him like a wall. "This is the line, Cal. Cross it again, and you won't just answer to me. You'll answer to everyone you've ever bled dry. And daylight doesn't leave anywhere to hide. For a long beat he held my stare. Then, with a sharp exhale, he stepped back, muttering under his breath. He turned, slid into his sedan, and slammed the door hard enough to rattle the frame. Tires screeched, and then he was gone, swallowed by daylight. The silence that followed was thick, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was relief. Naomi let out a long breath, her shoulders finally dropping. Tears welled, but they weren't the same tears I'd seen before. These were lighter, freer. She crossed the space between us and gripped my hand tight. "It's over," she whispered. I glanced at Darius, who nodded, holding up his phone where the recording blinked red. "Yeah," he said. "It's over for him. He just doesn't know how bad yet." I looked down at the watch, felt the steady tick against my wrist. My father's words came back to me like an echo carried through time. "Remember who you're trying to be." I pulled Naomi into my arms, felt her melt against me. The weight finally gone. For the first time in years, the air around us felt like ours again. We'd drawn the line, and this time it was permanent.